Global Development Finance Conference is sitting in Cape Town this week. The conference brings together researchers, academics, commercial and central banks and many other international development institutions. They focus on areas like social development, investments, infrastructure and many more. Professor Biekpe is the president of the Africagrowth Institute and a professor of development finance and econometrics at the UCT Business School in Cape Town, and he joins us now in our Sea Point studio. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and good morning to our listeners.
Professor, I want to talk about the conference, but we just saw an insert around the conflict in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I think it may be apt if I ask you first, you work a lot on the continent and understand finance on the continent. How does these kinds of conflicts on the African continent affect our growth and our prosperity, really?
It does very bad, very poorly. You remember, investment is about people's perceptions. If I think that I want to get some returns in the country, the first thing you think about is peace and security. So once there is conflict, most people, if you have money, you don't want to go near there. And also sometimes the conflict, even if it's contained, but the information surrounding the conflict can have very, very far-reaching consequences. So what's happening in the DRC affects the neighboring countries, it affects the continent. Most people in New York and England don't understand even the difference between DRC and South Africa.
Yeah. So
it's really very, very, very bad when we have conflicts like that raging the continent.
6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world right now sits in Africa. What does that say to you, and how must Africa manage its finances over the next decade in order to get to that prosperity we all want?
It's been very hard over the last 15 years. If you remember before that, 20 years ago, the continent was famine everywhere, wars and whatnot. But over the few years, about a decade plus, the governments have come to realize that, you know what, East Asia and other emerging markets are moving ahead unless Africans come together and then, in a way, trade together, talk together, and then meet together, and then have policies that are coherent and then correlated in a way that we are not going to go very far. They've succeeded in doing that. But every time you have bad news about governance, bad news about how the continent is governed, then that goes to undo what has been done over the years. But I'm hoping that when you look at, you did mention rightly, a lot of African countries have realized that peace and security is very important. Typical example is Ghana and other West African countries within the Southern Africa. There are also countries that are going that route. So I think overall we are moving in the right direction, but we just don't like this bad news to keep coming on onto the continent.
Let's move on to the conference. Can you tell us a little bit about the conference that is being hosted in Cape Town, and also maybe give us a little bit of an update as to what happened there the last day or so?
Yeah, the conference started yesterday and then it's continuing today and then we'll end tomorrow. The continent is an annual event. Every year, luckily, we bring it to Cape Town. The last time we took it to Dubai, just to include our Middle Eastern brothers and sisters, which was very successful. But it happens every year. The whole purpose behind that is normally to try and then bring, for the first time, I must also add, academics and then policymakers together. What tends to happen is that we've got so many academic institutions, people of learning who are recognized internationally and got ideas that can support governments. But we never meet together. So what this conference does is bring all of them together. If you remember yesterday, we had the finance minister and also senior bank officials from the DBS, Mo Sheikh and others were there. So it's something that looks at development and says, look, if you look at London and New York, and then compare that to a place like a very poor area in Somalia or any area in Ghana that is very poor, or poor countries in the continent, what can we do to turn those poorer countries through finance and development to at least let the people, the citizens, also enjoy some benefit? And that's what development finance does. If I can make it simpler, if you look at a place like Santon and then Alexandria Township on the other hand, what is it that makes Santon a first world economy? But the next door neighbor, you get Alexandria Township, which is very, very poor. So the finances, the models that are used to finance both cities are different. In Santon, it's very, very expensive, but then the reason why it's expensive is that the life there is, people are educated, things are pricey. You go to Alexandria Township, the opposite happens, where you get people who are poorer. So how do we then turn the poorer environment into a sustainable environment? So development finance covers that.
What are the big resolutions, Professor, that you hope will be coming out of this conference when you are done?
The big resolution, normally every year we have an end of conference report where we, if I can use the term, practicalize it and then consult with our partner. We do work with a lot of development finance institutions and government. So we write a report and then make it available and then make some suggesting proposals on how we can improve based on best practices around the world and also best practices case studies that are discussed at the conference, and then put that forward to policymakers. So it's a very, very practical conference, even though the environment is academic, but things like microfinance, things like governance systems, those are the things that we discuss there. So in the end, we come out with a report that actually reflects how development finance can grow and develop in a non-academic environment.
Professor, thank you very much for joining us. We wish you all the success there with the conference, and I'm sure we'll get more updates coming out of Cape Town. Thank you.